Good morning. Welcome. Welcome everyone. How's everybody today? Okay. So a few of us were not here last week. They're on the bus trip, and hopefully that you had a good time and you're back joining with us. And I know that some of you who were on that trip did manage to see it in video form because we are on Facebook and YouTube. Also, you can get it through the Shul's website. So, just to once again to thank the sponsor, the overall sponsor of this program, Rita Geller, is here. This is done in memory of her husband Howard. We also had an anonymous donor that came forward last time because it's a good problem, what they used to call nachas tikatsaris. We don't have enough books for everybody because so many of us have come out to join in this effort. So the new Gemaras, there are more of them on order, and as soon as we get them, you'll have them. If it turns out that it takes a little longer, you'll have photocopies every time, so you'll be able to follow the text. So, in addition to sponsoring those, to thanking those sponsors who are interested in this class alone, we also have many people in our shul who step up to sponsor the learning programs. And I just wanted to acknowledge all of them. It'll take us a minute. Sue and Arnie Garlick, Sharon and Fred Lisker, family and friends, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler and Martha Gitler, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, friends of Joe Wolf, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, friends of Nina Moynester, many friends of Stephen Vigder, Rebecca Lewis and Susan Witansky, Haran and Mel Haller, Mira and Herschel Sennett, Clara and Jonas Weiser, Oscar and Shelley Moll, Isaac and Eda Novick, Judith and Michael Paretsky, Ruth Kosman, Gedalia and Phyllis Reese, Yvette and Stu Beck, Fred and Susan Koss, Sharon and Fred Lisker, Jack and Sheila Prince, Betty and Howard Zavin, Alan and Helen Baker, Siggy and Lala Bessler, and Bernice Plitnick. Thank you to all of them. So just a very quick review of how the Talmud is set up. We start out with a Mishnah, which is usually a few lines in Hebrew, spelling out the law. Gary, are you eavesdropping on the women's class? Are you eavesdropping on the ladies' class?
No. I want to make sure you have proper air conditioning.
Okay, there's the man. All right, thank Gary. So we start out with the Mishnah.
We love it.
That's what's in the center box there.
Right, the center box is the main text.
It's like crazy hot.
The first part of it is the Mishnah. The Mishnah was written or compiled basically between the years of 50 before the Common Era and about 200 into the Common Era. It was done in Israel because at that time, that's where most of Jewish scholarship was taking place in Eretz Yisrael. It's written in Hebrew for that reason, and it was finished and sealed by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the famous Rebbe. That was done around the year 200. And then from 200 to 500, that's when the Gemara was basically studied, discussed. Some people took some notes on it. Eventually, Ravina and Ravashi put it together. They edited it, and they put it into the form that we have today. And that finished at about the year 500. And then from then on, all these commentaries that we see around the basic text, they began showing up within the next couple hundred years, and that's actually operating until today.
So, David, one question. That whole thing in the middle is the Mishnah.
So the Mishnah, if you have this in your handout too, or in your book, Marcia.
Okay.
If you take a look, it's on page 198 in the Hebrew part. If you open the book from the right side, or in the English side, you're on page, I think, 216. Let me tell you how this book is set up, because that might be a little bit confusing. This is what we're using is what we're using is the Koren Gemara. This is published in Eretz Yisrael. It was an institute started by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz of blessed memory, and the way that it's set up is that if you open the book from the right side, then you'll see what we have up here, which is the traditional way that the Gemara is published. That's what they call Tzuras Hadaf, the image of the daf, of the page. So what he did was he shows us how the Gemara is generally set up. So if you are comfortable with that, you have that. And then if you were to open the book from the other end, open it from the left side like an English book, then you're going to get the Hebrew text is there. It's laid out differently because it's laid out in a way that helps us to be able to read it. And it goes usually a paragraph at a time, and then alongside of this Hebrew, you have English text. The bold is translation, almost word for word translation. And then the rest of the text that's not in bold is his commentary about it. And what he does is, a lot of what we see on this page, he puts a lot of it together and he puts it into his own commentary. And then around the page, you'll have a section of halacha, or sometimes there'll be footnotes or biography. So you get more than just the basic text. So it depends on what's comfortable for you. And something I just learned today, because Andrea made us all these copies, is that on the outer corner of every page, whether you're in the Hebrew or the English, if you're looking on the English side, so the outer corner of the page gives you the reference where you can find it looking on the Hebrew side. So if you open up the Hebrew way, you can find that where the Hebrew location. And the same way, if you're using the Hebrew way, right, which is like this, on the outer corner, it tells you what page you can find the English translation if you open it from the other end of the book. Okay?
On the English side, is the Hebrew in Hebrew or is it in Aramaic?
Okay. The Mishnah was written in Hebrew. The Gemara is written in Aramaic. The script is the same, the letters are the same, and the reason that it's done in these languages is because the Mishnah was done in Israel, where everybody spoke Hebrew. By the time the Gemara came along, they were in another country, they were in Babylonia, and the vernacular that was used at that time was Aramaic. So the appearance is the same, but the language is different. There are some similarities, but there are some differences as well. So when you're looking at the English, as you asked, so the Hebrew writing or Hebrew letters, if it's the Mishnah part, it's Hebrew language. If it's the Gemara, it's going to be Aramaic.
Even in there, because the Steinsaltz Gemara
Right.
was transferred from the Aramaic to the Hebrew.
So the original Steinsaltz Gemara, which I love, and I had the great pleasure and honor to meet Rabbi Steinsaltz once we were in Israel. He started his translation about 35 or 40 years ago, and every volume that came out, I bought the next volume. So I have the set. I bought it for my son-in-law too. And what he did is he changed the way that the Gemara appears. What he did is he put the Hebrew text in the center like this, but then he put his own commentary around the edges, and his own commentary he wrote in modern Hebrew. And if you like that was a lot of fun for me. It was challenging for me too to be able to translate into modern Hebrew. So I wasn't working with an English translation, but I was working with a translation from Aramaic into modern Hebrew. And even though people like me thought it was a great thing, he did get a lot of criticism because he changed what they call the Tzuras Hadaf, the appearance of the page. So a lot of people, traditionalists, didn't like that. They felt that even though he was performing a service by translating into modern Hebrew, which is very valuable because there are many Hebrew speakers that English is not going to work for them, and that was a very big benefit for them, but he changed the appearance. So in this edition, he's bringing us an English translation, which is helpful to those of us who use English as our main language, but he went back to the original appearance, Tzuras Hadaf. He did change it a little bit because he includes the vowel sounds, and in the original the vowel sounds weren't there. He put in the vowel sounds to make it easier for us to read it. But so this part, what we're looking at now is the way if you open up an old Gemara, anything you have in your house or whatever, what you'll find in the shul library, that's the way it was set up back in the 15th century or so, and that's kind of the way that it has stayed.
Who translated it into English? He was not an English speaker himself, was he?
Sure. Rabbi Steinsaltz is an English speaker. Yeah. So he was an English speaker. So he did his translation into English. And there are many English translations out there. The first one that I know about was the Sansino, was done back in the 30s or 40s. Art Scroll is a pretty popular one too. And I just happen to like this one, so that's the one they were using. I find that he gets the point, better than some others. So, but they're all certainly useful, and they really opened up this whole ability to study to all of us, because there is a certain amount of criticism of this approach, because after all, you're supposed to have to work hard to learn, and you get you benefit from the hard work you do. But the fact of the matter is that when the rabbis went down to Bavel and they wrote it in the language that people understood. They wrote it in Aramaic. And if you look at the Rambam, for example, he wrote in Aramaic because that was the language that people spoke and understood. It made it accessible. And what Steinsaltz has done is he's made it accessible to us. And what you were saying is the Hebrew translation. So that was one step, and then he took it another step further, bringing it to us in English. And in this edition, we have both. So if you are comfortable using the Hebrew side, that's there for you. If you want to flip over, sometimes you may not know a word, and the page reference is on the lower corner of the page. You can flip back to the English side, and you get that translation, and you can go back and forth. And so that's the idea of it. We're going to meet a couple of new people this time. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was the head of the academy in Tiberias in Eretz Yisrael, and even though most scholarship was going on in Bavel, he was considered the outstanding scholar of his day. So we're going to meet him, and
what
then
was his day? What were,
Rabbi Yochanan.
yeah, what was?
So
his
he
time
was
period?
like 3rd century, and he was in Tiberias. And then a couple of his students, Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Hanania. We're going to hear from them today. They were like late 3rd, early 4th century. So just to review, what we were talking about is what happens Erev Pesach, the afternoon, the evening before Pesach. How do we conduct ourselves? And we were left last time with a question. And I like to do that if I can, because then it makes you come back. You want to get the answer to the question. We were left with a question that we said that, if you remember, we talked about the time to daven mincha, right? We daven mincha in the afternoon, but what does that exactly mean? And there are two types, or two standards for when you daven mincha. One is called mincha katana, one is called mincha gedola. And what they refer to is how much time is remaining between the time you can begin to say mincha and the time and sundown. So mincha katana is a short time, mincha gedola is a long time. Mincha gedola is 5.5 hours before sunset and sundown, really. And if you remember, we talked about the hours, right? You guys remember what that means when we say 12 hours or 5.5 hours or 9.5 hours? We're not talking about 60-minute hours. What we're talking about is halachic hours, and that means, so I didn't see Gary on the bike this morning, Marcia, but a lot of times we see him, we're out there before davening. This time, I think Gary started coming to 7 o'clock minyan, so he goes later. But but before when the day breaks, that's the beginning of the halachic day, and what we do is we take that time between the daybreak and the sundown, and we divide that by 12. And in the summertime, those hours are longer than 60 minutes. In the wintertime, like now, those hours are shorter than 60 minutes. And those are called halachic hours. So a halachic hour could be 45 minutes, it could be 65 minutes. And the way that we establish what time you're supposed to daven mincha is based on the halachic hours. So mincha gedola, the big mincha, starts at 6.5 hours into the day. That's 6.5 halachic hours. Okay, so if a halachic hour is 55 minutes, let's say, and sunrise is 6 o'clock. So what time could you start davening mincha if it was mincha gedola? Pardon?
2:30. If it's 6.5 hours, that's 2:30.
No, you might think it's 2:30, Rita, but
Earlier.
it's what is it? Well, let's figure it out. If an hour is 55 minutes, so 6 hours is 330 minutes, and half an hour is another 27.5 minutes. So it's 357.5 minutes, which works out to
1.5, 1:30.
which works out to how many hours? It's less than 6 hours, right?
Right.
So it means it's before noon. If right? If daybreak was at 6 a.m., so that's before noon on a short day in the wintertime. Approximately, right? Okay. So that's mincha katana, mincha gedola, big space between the time you can daven mincha and evening, nighttime. Then there's mincha katana. Mincha katana, shorter space, right? Kata means small katana. That starts 9.5 hours into the day. Okay, so I'm not going to do the math in my but you get the idea. So you have to really compute how many hours there are. So you know how many minutes there are between the two events, and you divide that by 12. That's how you get your halachic hours. Now you multiply it by 9.5, so you get what time does mincha katana start. And what we learned last time was that you're not permitted to start a meal on Erev Pesach after, it says samach lemincha, near mincha. So what does that mean, near mincha? And then the Gemara asked, well, why are you bringing this up with reference to Pesach? Doesn't that apply to Shabbos and other holidays as well? And the answer is that it does. And so what I gave you today, the second handout, we'll talk about that in a minute, is the Shulchan Aruch, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, because you can see what the actual halachas are and how we practice today. So the Shulchan Aruch, this book that I made you copies, is called Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. This was written by a Rabbi Gansfried in 1864, and it's an authoritative source if you want to know what is the rule. You don't have time to ask the rabbi or whatever it is. This is available. You can look it up. And the particular edition that I'm using today is a pretty new one. It was, I think, last printing in 2018, and it has not just the 1864 comments, but also some of Reb Moshe Feinstein and the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah was written in the 1930s, so it's pretty much up to date. And the first one, where it talks about Shabbos. So if you take a look at it, okay, you have that handout.
I don't know, I have both of these, where would it be?
It's the one in your right hand,
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
okay?
Here on the bottom.
Because the Gemara said, why are you talking about Pesach? What are you teaching me?
People are confused about
The second page here.
Page 14.
Says 14 and 15 on the front.
Page
That where it
14.
starts?
Page 14, right? Okay, thank you.
Page 14. I'll get it. Yes. Where's 14?
There's a 14 on there.
Oh,
It's the shorter page.
The shorter, right? That's right. It's the one that goes
It
horizontal.
says it here also, my shop,
Yeah, right, because that's the Gemara. And what I'm giving you right now is
Shulchan Aruch.
is the modern halacha, right?
Okay.
What is how do we practice? Because the Gemara doesn't always give us. The Gemara doesn't always give us. In fact, most often the Gemara does not give us halacha. It gives us the debate, the discussion, the sources, and so on. Doesn't always give us how do we practice today. And what I've done is I've found the reference, and I'm going to share it with you so you know what is, because if you only had the Gemara, you wouldn't necessarily know how to practice. So if you take a look, you're on that page 14, and if you go down right below, there's about, I don't know, a quarter of the way down, there's a line across there. Then you see like a paragraph symbol and a number 10. Okay, so it says, "May Tesha Shos Zmanios Ulamala," right? It's from 9 seasonal hours, right? That's what we just talked about, halachic hours, right? So from that time has passed, from the beginning of the day.
Somebody's phone.
Okay, so it says from that point, mitzvah limnoa milakboa seuda. From that point on, it's proper to refrain from having a fixed meal. In other words, you don't sit down to eat a full meal from 9 seasonal hours. Okay, so and just bear in mind that when the Gemara said from mincha time or samach lemincha, so mincha time is 9.5 hours. Samach lemincha, near mincha, is at 9 hours. Right? Because it's not exactly, it's near it, not exactly the same time. And that's going to be important for our discussion. And the point is that why are they even asking this question? Why are they asking, isn't the same thing on Shabbos as it is on Pesach? And what they're saying is, don't waste my time telling me something I already knew. And the Gemara does not waste our time. If they put something in there, they're putting it in there to teach us something. There's new information that they're sharing with us. When they tell us that on Erev Pesach we have to observe a certain way, then it's telling us something that we didn't necessarily know. We'll get back to the Shulchan Aruch in a little bit, but to go on with the Gemara. So the question we were left with, and if you're in the English, you are on page 216, the top of the page. Okay, so if you have the handout, just open to the English part because I gave you both in there. Okay, the page number is on the lower corner of the page. So if you're on page 216, that's in the English. If you're in the Hebrew part, so it's on page 198, opening from the Hebrew side, and on the English part, it's right at the beginning of the page. If you're looking at and the Hebrew one, you take a look at the Gemara here, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara asks, so he says, "Erev Shabbos samach lemincha shari." Are you permitted to eat a big meal? Because the idea, what's the idea anyway? Why can't we eat a big meal Friday night? Yes, Eva.
Ready for Shabbos, enjoy the Shabbos meal.
Enjoy the Shabbos meal, right? You want to enter Shabbos with an appetite. And the same thing, you want to enter Pesach with an appetite. And pardon? So, you like a nap. Well, the nap is Shabbos afternoon. The point is that we want to be entering Shabbos, we want to be entering Yontif with an appetite.
Empty stomach.
What's a
Pardon?
With an empty stomach.
Not necessarily quite an empty stomach, but at least with the desire for the meal. You should look forward to the Shabbos meal.
What do they mean by baraita?
Okay, thank you, Marcia. So what a baraisa is, and the group of people, there are two basic groups of people who wrote the Mishnah and the Gemara. Those who were doing the Mishnah, which are the earlier ones, right, from 50 before the Common Era to about 200. Those people are called Tanaim, and the ones who did the Gemara are called Amoraim, because they told it over, la Amor, to speak.
What was it? Could you say that again, please?
The people who did the Mishnah are called Tanaim,
Okay.
and those that made the Gemara are called Amoraim. Okay? And the Mishnah is very brief, and there was a lot of material out there that was not included in the Mishnah. And it was written by or attributed to other Tanaim. And what they did, that was called, those statements or comments or whatever that were done by other Tanaim that didn't make it into the main authoritative Mishnah are called Braita. Because the word Braita in Aramaic means outside. They're outside what's inside, right? What's inside is the Mishnah, which is in our text, which Rabbi Yehuda Nasi codified, compiled, edited, and included. But all that other information is important and authoritative too. And the Braita is less authoritative than Mishnah because it didn't make it in, but it's more authoritative than a statement of an Amora, because the principle is that you always, the closer that we get to Matan Torah, Har Sinai, the more authoritative is the information, right? And each generation is, unfortunately, we're getting further and further away. We're weaker and weaker. The statements of the Tanaim hold more weight than the statements of the Amoraim. So if you have a situation where an Amora is being quoted, and then someone will say, well, hang on a second, there is a Braita which says something totally different from what you're saying, which means that you're incorrect, because the Braita is there, even though the Braita is not written in
He's higher up.
It's a higher authority. That's right. So that's why they're going to very often bring in a Braita. Okay, so what's happening in our case? So we say the Gemara asked the question, the Erev Shabbos samach lemincha shari. So Erev Shabbos near to mincha, is that okay? You're allowed to have a big meal Friday to noon? And we know that you don't, because that's how we live, and we just read from the Shulchan Aruch telling us that that's the halacha. You're not supposed to enter Shabbos on a full stomach. So then it's going to quote a Braita. This word hatanya means that they're quoting a Braita, and the Braita says, Lo yochal adam be'erev Shabbos yomim tovim mitesha sha'os ulamala. A person should not eat Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon, or Erev Yom Tov, so if Yom Tov were tonight, for example, right? So that would mean that from 9 hours in the day and onward, we shouldn't be eating, right? Kedei, why? Just as Harry told us, Kedei she'yikones l'Shabbos kishu tava, right? When you should enter Shabbos with an appetite, right? That's the point. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi has a different opinion. He says, Ochel v'holech ad shetechshach. He says we can continue to eat until it gets dark. So he's a much more lenient opinion. And I gave it away because I read from the Shulchan Aruch. We know we don't
follow him.
We don't follow his that opinion, right? Because we're
Right.
but if we read a little bit further, we'll see it's not exactly not quite so black and white. But the point is that we don't say you can eat anything you want until it gets dark. Omar Mar Zutra. So Mar Zutra, who was he has the title Mar, which is like sir, because he was the exilarch, which means he was the head of the Jewish community. Where are you, Harry?
She's trying to figure out where you are.
Where are you on this?
Where am I? Okay.
Page 216 in the English.
Yeah, we have 216, you said the bottom.
No, top. The page number's on the bottom.
Yeah, I know, but originally you said.
I'm sorry, Bob.
All right,
No.
fine.
You got
Yeah,
you
we're on
with
the
me?
top.
Everybody's with me? Okay, if you're in the English, it's on page 216. If you're in the Hebrew, it's on the page number says 198 on top. So Mar Zutra says, wait a second. You're telling me that this brisa seems to be in contradiction to our Mishnah, because our Mishnah starts out, it says, Erev Sachim, Samach lemincha lo yochal adam ad shetechshach. Right? So we started, that's the beginning of our Mishnah. You do not eat right after 9, when it's close to mincha, you have to stop eating. And now we say that Rabbi Yossi says you can eat until dark. That seems to be contradictory, right?
What is he, Rabbi Yossi?
He's a Tana.
Oh, so
He's a Tana. So he's authoritative. So the point is that an Amora cannot disagree with him. Another Tana can, and they do. And you see, Rabbi Yehuda has a different opinion. Because Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi are both Tanaim. So they're both active, like 2nd century, and they can argue with one another. And sometimes you'll find Rabbi Yehuda in a Mishnah, sometimes you'll find Rabbi Yossi in a Mishnah, sometimes you find them in a Brisa. And so the question is, Mar Zutra says, are you telling me that this brisa that you're quoting is accurate? Because don't forget, it was not written down. It was handed down, it was memory. Very possible it could be wrong. So he said, are you telling me that this brisa is correct, the text? Dilma mishtabashtahu. Maybe it's in error. Maybe it's the text has been corrupted, right? We see that on our computers all the time, right? File corrupted, right? So it's nothing new. Apparently this happened 2,000 years ago too. Amalei Mareimar. So Mareimar, also an Amora, is answering to this statement of Mar Zutra. The Itema Rav Yemar, and maybe it could have been something, maybe it wasn't Mareimar who made the statement, maybe it was someone called Rav Yemar, because again, don't forget, everything is being written down, it was all handed down. So a lot of times you'll find they're not quite sure to whom to attribute a statement, and either it was a Mareimar or Rav Yemar. Anyway, so he says, well, let me tell you what happened, an incident that took place, and you're going to learn from what I saw how to behave. He says, "Ano ikla lepirkei Rab Pinchas b'rei Rav Ami." So Rab Pinchas b'rei Rav Ami, Pinchas, who was the son of Rav Ami, was a very well-known, prominent scholar, and he would give a talk, a lecture about Pesach before the holiday. That was before the holiday. He would study about the holiday. So he got up and he spoke, and then it says "V'kam tana v'tani kamei," and then this is going to be a little bit confusing, but it is what it is. There was a person. They had a person who had a photographic memory, and he could quote back these Mishnayos and Brises. He was called a Tana, even though he himself was not one of the authors, but he was like their encyclopedia. They would call him up, and he would spout it back. So what had happened? So he got up and he says, "The kibla mineh," and this statement was made that Rav Yossi says you can go until dark, and Rav Pinchas b'rei Reishua did not argue. Pinchas b'rei Rav Ami, he didn't disagree. He says so he accepted it. If that's the case, it seems like we have a contradiction. We've got a problem here, right? Because we have a Mishnah and a Brisa which are not agreeing with each other. Ella, so the Gemara says Machavarta to Rav Huna. He said we must accept the statement of Rav Huna, okay, and the Gemara says, and Rav Huna is an Amora, and he basically is commenting on the statements of the Tanoim, okay, and we're going to get into what exactly did he say. He says, Rav Huna minicha, so there was Rav Huna of the opinion that this is okay, that you have this contradiction. So he says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we get Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yochanan, new people that we're meeting today. Rabbi Yochanan was the head of the yeshiva. Rabbi Yirmiyah was his student, quoting his Rebbe. He said, Itema Amar Rabbi Abau, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, or someone else. Rabbi Abau quoting Rabbi Yossi Chanina. But the point was, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda b'erev Pesach. So they're splitting the difference here. When it comes to erev Pesach, we accept the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who said what? Who said that 9 hours before Pesach we don't eat, right? But we accept Rabbi Yossi's opinion Erev Shabbos. Okay? There's compromise. Okay?
Who is to say, respectfully, in halacha, in the Shulchan Aruch,
How did he know what to say?
Part of right? I mean,
Right.
how does that come about? I mean, that's the whole.
Right.
the
So
whole-
what Kate is asking is, okay, so now I just read you from this nice book and I gave you the handout. Who told him? Who gave him the authority to say that?
Who elected him?
Who elected him? That's right. So
Just have a
Karen.
question to clarify. You're saying Rav Yehuda says 9 hours before Erev Pesach you have to stop eating.
No, he's 9 hours into the day.
9 halachic
From 9 halachic hours into the day. Okay, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says until dark. So how did Rabbi Gansfried, with all due respect, have the nerve to write this? Yes? Tell us.
He didn't allow any eating after all. It's not a fast day.
Well, we're going to get to that too. We're going to get to that. And so how he got to say what he said is that for centuries really, what took place is a lot of I wouldn't say misinformation or lack of information. Don't forget what was going on in the world. You had political and military turmoil going on everywhere. Jews are being exiled left and right, and the teaching of Torah was illegal in a lot of places. Rabbis were tortured for it and killed for it, and a lot of the information did get lost in a certain way, or was not necessarily known to everyone, and even the information that people knew, it was hard to transmit, right? I mean, we happen to be reading in Daf Yomi. We're learning Masechta Megillah right now. So in the Megillah, when Haman made his decree right? That the Jews we're going to wipe out the Jews. Did he send out an email and reply all? How did he let everybody? How were the people informed? Right. Letters are written. They gave it to riders like the Pony Express. They went everywhere, and so that was what it wasn't just. That was with a unified kingdom.
Do all the posting follow the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or do they go back to the Shulchan Aruch and the Mappa? Because the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is pretty extreme in its.
So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is
What's
pretty.
the question?
She asked if the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is accepted by everyone, and no, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is not accepted by everyone. And what I've brought you today, the handouts that I brought you, give the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, translated into English, with comments by more of our contemporaries, like Rav Moshe Feinstein, who just passed away a few years ago, the Mishnah Berurah, which was written in the 1930s and 40s, and sometimes they disagree with him, and there are footnotes in there that tell you what different disagreement they had, and most commonly those are accepted. Rav Moshe or Mishnah Berurah are accepted by almost everybody. But to get back to, sure.
It's because it's say Hashem Elohim Emet, so he has the Emet with a big Aleph, and he gave us some little sparks for everyone, and maybe that's why he says Elu va'elu.
Divrei Elokim Chaim. Right.
So
You're right. But we need to know, when do I have to stop eating? So even though there are a lot of opinions and they're all, let's say, motivated by the same desire to get at the truth, because that's what we're here for. We're here for the truth. Still in all, we need to know what to do. And so this semi-chaotic situation existed for a long, long time. And along came the Rambam, and he put it into an order. What he did was he compiled books of halacha. He listed the 613 mitzvos, and he said he was criticized at the time for actually putting down into words what the halacha is. And not everybody agrees with him. Even in his day, there were people who disagree with him, like you have the Ramah and others who disagree with what the Rambam wrote. But the Rambam is considered to be, at least for that, the most authoritative. And then at least we have a starting point. From then on, there's going to be disagreement. There still is disagreement, even to this day. There are certain questions that are, modern situations arise that people didn't face. I'll give you a silly example. There are people who used to say that if you're writing, I don't know, if your daughter tells you, sends you a text and says, a neighbor passed away, right? So, are you allowed to say, or your grandson got accepted into Harvard? Are you allowed to write on your phone, "Thank God," and spell out G-O-D? Can you write that?
No, you
Right?
have to put it.
No,
in.
we never write that.
Because on a piece of paper,
You have to put.
you write G-D, right? So I asked Rabbi Teitz, am I allowed to spell out God's name? He said, yes, you are. Because it does not really exist. It's only, it's virtual. It's not really there. It's not really there. So that's just, it's really not there. And then the question was, another one, a lot of us have a sitter on our phone, right? A lot of people, you'll see them in shul davening. You think that they're talking on their phone. They're actually using their phone as a sitter, right? So can I go into the bathroom with my phone now in my back pocket? Because
separate keys, besoch keys.
so Marcia wants to compromise. She says keys. There is a principle called keys besoch keys. So if I have it in my pocket inside another pocket, so then it's double. But suppose I don't. I just have it I don't have necessarily a case on my phone, and I have a sitter on there. Can I go into the bathroom with that? The answer is you can, because it's not really there. But I'm not here to give you love. I'm saying that things are that our religion is alive. What we're doing is alive, and every one of us has the right to ask questions about what's going on, and when something new comes up, it has to be evaluated, examined, and treated. So what the Rambam did is he gave us at least a starting point, and there are people who are going to agree with him, disagree with him, but at a certain point, the next level down or next generations later, they can't exactly disagree with him. They have to start with his point and then go forward in viewing a modern situation. And so the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's a long answer to a short question, but so what? What he put it into a form that we could have in our house. This particular series that I have, I think it's about 6 books. It's Art Scroll, but it's got a lot of information. Just the basic Kitzur is a small volume, like the size of a siddur, and if you're able to read it, you can open up and you can read it. But you don't. But that's 1864, and so you don't have the more modern interpretations of Moshe Feinstein and the Mishnah Berurah. So Art Scroll gives me that, and I have it. It has the English translation, makes it easy for me too. But so to your question, can we accept it as an authority? Not necessarily. But what they've done for us is they put the other authorities who may disagree with him and give it to you there too. And then it's up to you really to ask your local rabbi and determine for yourself. You know, I mean, how do I kosher my dishwasher, for example? This was not known in 1864. You know, I mean, my mother got the first dishwasher in 1959. So he can't. The answer to that is not here. So you need to be able to ask your local synagogue rabbi, assuming he's authoritative, and you're going to get an answer. But it's at least the place to start. And so what I wanted, the reason I brought it in, is just to show you how we practice today. So now we're left with a situation that is the Brisa, is it correct? Has it been corrupted? So we're basically saying that no, it's correct. But then we're quoting Rabbi Yirmiyah in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. He says the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda Erev Pesach. So Erev Pesach we go by Rabbi Yehuda, and Erev Shabbos like Rabbi Yossi. So let's go on a little bit. He says, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda be'erev Pesach. So halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda erev Pesach, nichlal. Therefore, we see the poleg Rabbi Yossi b'travayu. So now we have, who do we have here? We have that we have Rabbi Yehuda, and here Rabbi Yossi. He says Rabbi Yossi disagrees in both cases, in Shabbos and in Pesach. So the Gemara says, "Lo." He says, "No, not so." He says, "Halacha mechlal de peligi b'hafsaka." What is his disagreement on? Hafsaka. What does hafsaka mean? What? A break, a separation, right? So, what does that mean? That means the Tanya. Here's another Brisa, Marsha. Mafsikin l'shabbosos divrei Yehuda. If we sit down to a meal tomorrow on Friday afternoon, and what time is Shabbos this week? Around
5:15.
5:15, whatever time it is. So we sit down to a meal Shabbos afternoon, and it gets dark. Now it becomes Shabbos. What do we do now? I mean, do we stop our meal and then we make Kiddush and start over again, or are we permitted to finish up our meal? Right, so that's called hafsaka. Do we stop? Do we break? Do we stop what we've been doing? So he says, the Sanya, quoting a Brisa, mafsikin l'shabbosos divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, you do stop. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if we were sitting down to a meal Friday afternoon, and it became evening, and now we have to stop it. We have to make Kiddush. He said, stop the music, right? Stop everything. And now you're going to start a new meal. You're going to make Kiddush. That's Rabbi Yehuda says that. Rabbi Yossi Omer, a mafsikin. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says, no, continue finish your meal. Okay? And now they're gonna,
Wait, when do you bench?
so if you end your meal, you should be benching, right?
But if you don't?
You should bench. If you don't, so look, a lot of things that you should be doing, maybe you're not doing, but you should, if you're ending the meal, you should bench for that meal and then start the next meal. So,
That's what you get.
so now they're gonna give us another example of something that actually took place, and by observing how people practice the religion, if there's somebody that we respect, then we're gonna understand and we're gonna follow that, right? So if you wanna know what to do, let's say you never had an aliyah in shul, or let's say Torah or would decide to allow women to have aliyahs. Sorry, I said that, and I said it on tape, but I don't. But I
Back it up. Okay, so wait, finish what you were gonna say.
So what I was going to say is that, okay, so let's say Marcia gets called up for an aliyah, but Marcia never had an aliyah before. She doesn't know what to do. So what she does is she watches Gary when he gets an aliyah, and she'll just do the same thing, because if Gary did it, it's got to be okay, right? So.
Right.
Exactly right, and that's the idea. And what's happening here is the Gemara says Maaseh Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is in brackets, which means square brackets, which means the text should be added in. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, now our three protagonists. Shoyim Mesubin ba'Akko, they were reclining to eat a meal in Akko. They were all three in Akko, and there. By the way, we're running out of time. So all right, I'll finish the story and then we're going to have to end. They were reclining, and the way that they used to eat is everybody would have a nice couch, and they would bring them the little table. It wasn't like we ate, everybody's around the big table. Everybody had a little table. The waiter would bring the table in. The food would be placed on the table. What happened? They were sitting in Akko, and they were having this meal. And then what happened? The Kiddush Alayhem Hayom. It became Shabbos. It became Shabbos. They were eating Friday afternoon. It became Shabbos. Amalei Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said to Rabbi Yossi, "But Rebbe," he said, "Sir," he had respect for him. Ritzoncha nafsik. Should we stop our meal now? And we're going to find out next week what they actually did.
I can't imagine any of these rabbanim doing that.